As a kid who attended a high school where joining the tennis team was considered a truly pathetic endeavor reserved solely for losers who couldn't even make the bench on any other sport team, I've grown accustomed to enduring all the criticism and ridicule that the sport of tennis receives from the general public, a majority of whom base their opinions not on any tennis matches watched in real life, but instead what is portrayed or parodied on TV or in movies. Though despite some enduring misconceptions on how tennis is actually played nowadays, none hold a candle to that one tennis stereotype that draws ire and mockery worldwide. I think you've heard it before.
You know what? You gotta stop the grunting.
Yep, that. Grunting, shrieking, screaming, what many flipping the channels will describe as humans giving birth on a tennis court. The act of excessive air exhalation from an increasing number of players has certainly drawn undesirable attention to the sport, with many professionals themselves decrying their opponents' distracting behavior as unfair and unwelcome. Yet despite professional tennis's governing bodies putting their foot down in recent years with proposals to either regulate or outright ban the noise, a vocal and significant percentage vehemently oppose the suggestion of any rule changes, describing the act of grunting for many players as a lifelong trait crucial to their continued performance. However, with persistent rumors that many top academies in fact teach excessive and distracting grunting in an effort to one-up competition, it's time for that loser high school tennis player who grew up to be that loser who makes tennis videos to investigate exactly how necessary the sounds from some of the sport's most prominent players are, and determine if we may see a future where the term "quiet please" actually holds true. So, you may ask, who was it? Which one of these famous offenders started the controversial grunting trend that appears to be almost commonplace in modern professional tennis? Surprising to many, the habit of heavy and noticeable breathing actually dates back quite further than commonly presumed. Though sources differ depending on which tennis historian asked, tennis's silent era came to an end beginning in the early 1960s, when players such as Vicky Palmer, the grunter, as many then nicknamed her, hit the scene producing loud yet compact, low-registering breathing sounds during ball contact. A noise that, while apparent to spectators and opponents, drew minimal, if any, complaints. This tepid acceptance of the practice held steady for over 30 years with little fanfare. That was until one rising star took the tennis grunt to the next level. With signature piercing grunts that far surpassed anything heard prior, the noise produced by Monica Seles in the early 90s stirred intense debate between players, tournament organizers, and press as to where the line should be drawn between acceptable and distracting. Though immense pressure was put on Seles to quiet down, with news outlets even introducing so-called gruntometers to their repertoire to measure on-court decibel count, she wasn't the only one. Andre Agassi and Jimmy Connors, two leading male players at the time, also began letting out audible grunts while playing, leading many critics to cheekily question the correlation between success and noise level. Whether one was to be found or not, none can deny that the immense popularity of so-called grunters ushered in the new age of modern tennis we see today, where heavier and heavier grunting now appears to be the norm amongst top players. But why? Can the excessive and loud breathing patterns actually improve one's tennis? Or is the trend nothing but, well, noise? A grunt. Tennis players are just yelling, right? Well, no, for the most part. Upon exhaling quickly and forcefully, a human's core muscles tighten and upper body muscles stabilize, allowing for more efficient outward energy transfer. The same phenomena can be witnessed in most activities requiring quick bursts of energy, all the way from competitive weightlifting to just getting up from the couch. In our case, a 2014 study found that skilled university tennis players on average hit with a 3.8 increase in ground stroke velocity and 4.9 increase in serve velocity when grunting, a marked improvement that provided up to 7 additional kilometers per hour in serve speed. Amazingly, the provided speed benefits came at no additional physiological cost in relation to perceived effort, meaning that grunting could be a performance-enhancing and sustainable match strategy. But what about how one player's grunting may affect their opponent? Surprisingly, we have research on that too. Participants in a separate study were asked to watch video clips of a professional tennis player striking a ball with or without an accompanying brief sound. Their task was to determine as quickly and accurately as possible whether the ball was being hit to their left or right side. Results revealed the noise did impair the speed and accuracy of the participants' directional decision-making by about 30 milliseconds on average. Okay, I know. 30 milliseconds? How significant is that? Quite. Putting our lab results into a real-life scenario, it can be suggested that a player enduring a grunt-related 30 millisecond response delay would pick up a typical rally shot 2 feet later than if no grunt were present. A result which in professional tennis is called significant. Okay, so armed with these facts, is that it? The tennis grunt is simply a byproduct of our evolving, performance-obsessed sport that just happens to come at the expense of non-grunters? Or as many have theorized, is something a bit more nefarious going on? Cue the sound wave. To truly gauge how loud modern players have become, Monica Selish's grunting throughout the 1990s reportedly reached 90 decibel levels, on par with that of a hairdryer. While quite loud, contrast that to a more recent Maria Sharapova, who at 101 decibels is louder than a food blender. Are your ears starting to ring? Well, put some earplugs in and experience the sounds of Michelle Larcher de Brito, the youngest of the three, whose screams register at a whopping 109 decibels, essentially the same as standing 3 feet from a power saw. Now, through interviews, all three have claimed that their grunting isn't purposely done or exaggerated for any diabolical purpose, but is simply the way they've always played since childhood. Childhoods, some digging would reveal, that all took place at the same location, the famed Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy in Bradenton, Florida. Historically renowned as a breeding ground for major tennis talent, rumors have swirled for years that Bollettieri's staff, and even Bollettieri himself, have not only encouraged but purposely taught aggressive or outright obnoxious grunting to gain a leg up on opponents. American professional Ryan Harrison, who himself trained at the academy for a number of years, said of the students, "They're a lot more noisy than they need to be. If you have a 7-year-old girl grunting louder than I can scream in my entire life, that's not really necessary." Former chief executive and chairman of the Women's Tennis Association, Stacey Allister, even disclosed in 2012 that the organization would be talking to the Bollettieri Academy about how to stop the next generation from being such loud grunters. These comments came at a time period where, after many years of minimal discussion or debate on the matter, many Bollettieri alumni and other rising stars such as Victoria Azarenka came under renewed scrutiny for their newfangled ear-splitting grunts, with spectators going as far as to outright mock the most egregious culprits. Allister announced during her tenure that it was time for the organization to drive excessive grunting out of the game for future generations, outlining a program to educate younger players about developing their games without grunting. Insiders even shared findings that on-court technology was being developed to assist umpires in determining whether players were grunting excessively, to finally put an end to the controversy once and for all. Yet despite talks of a ruling overhaul, as of today, essentially, nothing has been done, and grunting has continued unimpeded. Why did talks of regulation stall? And why might that actually be a good thing? Though opinions differ, many will agree on this. There's grunting, and there's grunting. Why are some players so loud? Were they coached to do so, like many have suggested about Bollettieri? Well, yes, but not for the reasons you might have thought. As revealed by research done by Dennis McConnell, a professor of applied physiology at the Center for Sports Medicine and Human Performance, narrowing the opening of your lungs will slow down the rate of airflow from them, while maintaining stiffness in the trunk and control over the breathing rhythm. It is in using this technique that some players feel the need to grunt. Of course, this braking action doesn't actually need to result in audible grunting, but it is easier to coach the controlled exhalation if you can hear it. As a result, some younger players may well be taught to grunt as a means of breath control. In essence, it may just be that although players are indeed coached to grunt, it most likely isn't done as a distraction or overreaction measure. In modern tennis, players give 110%, and the extra benefit that controlled breathing gives them may make the difference between a Grand Slam finalist and Grand Slam champion. This also gives validity to players who argue against any grunt-related rule changes, as grunting truly has been ingrained since childhood, a trait that they just can't turn off. Remember how Monica Seles received flack for being the game's first true grunter? In reaction to receiving so much negative press and criticism for grunting during her run at Wimbledon 1992, she made the decision to force herself to stay silent in the finals against Steffi Graf, an opponent she had just beaten weeks earlier. The result? An unfocused and out-of-sorts Seles was beaten handily by Graf, and Seles maintains that giving into the pressure of not grunting during that match remains her biggest regret to this day. In the end, despite vocal opposition to player volume, especially on the female side, women's tennis continues to rise in popularity, breaking records in overall viewership and witnessing little, if any, discernible decline due to grunting. In a reversal of opinion, WTA Chief Executive Steve Simon announced in 2017 that he had no plans to outlaw grunting in the game, stating that, if it becomes a hindrance, then obviously there are rules to address that. So yes, grunting is here to stay. Let's just hope it doesn't get too much louder, or I might have an issue with